Welcome to Josh Langley Gets to Know. Today we're going to get to know Donna Mazza. Now firstly, Donna is a senior lecturer at the School of Arts and Humanities and coordinates the arts program at ECU Southwest Bunbury campus. Secondly, Donna is a good friend of mine. She's a fabulous person. Thirdly, she released her second novel early this year, Fauna, and this has been getting amazing reviews. And it is such a different story. I wanted to get her on the program to talk about it, talk at the influence of why she wrote it, and about the research she had to put into it. Also about the writing process and what she's got coming up next. So sit back, pour a glass of wine, cup of coffee, whatever it is, and let's get to know WA author Donna Mazza. Donna Mazza, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Great. Nice to talk to you, Josh.
Now, look, we're going to talk a whole bunch of things. We're going to talk writing, we're going to talk books, and we're going to talk about what new projects you got coming up. But firstly, it's time to celebrate Fauna. I know Fauna's been out for a few months now. Can you tell us a little bit about what the book is about?
It's been out since February, actually. So
that's a whole stack of months.
That's a whole stack of months, yeah. The question it asks is, what if the child that you're carrying is not entirely human? And it explores a genetic experiment and volunteers to be, for her embryo to be edited with Neanderthal DNA. And she tells the story of her and her family as they go through the journey of pregnancy and bringing the child into the world and raising her among their other children as part of a scientific experiment.
That's a pretty bold premise, isn't it? Where did you come up with that idea? I mean, I'm going to, because I have a question about, you've sort of got a reputation for writing stories that are a little bit offbeat, a little bit bizarre, and that sort of delve into, not the macabre, but sort of this really otherworldly thing. Like some of your short stories have got a woman who splits in half, another one where people can buy tails and have tails put on. And obviously with Fauna, it's about the Neanderthal DNA. And where did that come from? Where did that spark of inspiration come from?
Well, I used to write realism. And about, I think it was about 2013 or so, I was an avid reader of National Geographic ever since I was a little kid. And we always have it in the house. Not anymore at the moment, but we did have. So I was reading an edition of National Geographic that had a story about this new technology called CRISPR technology. And CRISPR is a form of DNA editing technology that was developed around that time. And it allows the geneticist to go in there and take a piece of the DNA out and replace it with another piece of DNA in a very efficient manner. So because of this DNA editing technology, they were looking at the time at the DNA of extinct animals like the mammoth and the thylacine, the passenger pigeon, and looking at how they might restore those species through this new technology and how that new technology will bring that closer. And the article that I read was about the mammoth and the potential for the mammoth to be brought back by putting an edited Asian elephant DNA into an embryo of an Asian elephant.
That's a bit freaky. That's all sorts of ethics raised in those sort of questions, aren't they?
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on. Yeah. So I thought about it quite a lot. I was really interested in it. I read some more about it, and it just occurred to me that they might do this in people. So what would it be like for a mother to actually be raising a child where that's happened? Because, you know, the elephant mother would have to bring the baby mammoth to birth. So what would happen to a human mother who might be part of this process? And, you know, from the reading and things that I've done about it since, I've realized that process is, that experiment is kind of inevitable. And not so much in humans, but certainly in animals. They're proceeding along these lines. And you know, what would that look like? How would it feel? What relationship would they have? And it just kind of entered my imagination. And so I started this research project, and I wrote a short story about it called The Exhibit, and that was published in Westerly in 2015, and it won an award from them. Lots of people who read it said to me, I really want to know what happens. I love this story, and the enthusiasm for the concept from lots of people who I know who read it kind of spurred me on to write some more.
Yeah.
And I've written lots of short stories about different kind of topics related to that, like, you know, what would happen to the biological byproducts of these experiments, the ones where it doesn't go right, and those kinds of things. So, but in Fauna, I just explored it in its full depth. That's how it seems to me, anyway.
Well, you did, and well, you have. I mean, when I read it back in February, and just the feeling of apprehension that you get through the whole story, that something could go wrong at any moment, and that you almost feel like you're on edge, you know, as the mothers, even pregnant, all the things that goes along with the pregnancy, and how that is different from any normal pregnancy, and even just the premise of why the family take up the option of having the baby, and it's for the money, it's to get the extra money, isn't it? Really? Yeah. And but then again, no one knows what the ramifications are, and I think as you draw that out through the book, and the emotional ramifications as the main character, as I'm reading this, I'm feeling tense, and I'm feeling anxious as she almost disintegrates mentally as the whole process goes. And I think when people read it, they go, wow, and they go, what would I do in that situation? I think that's a sign of a good book, when you get the reader going, what would I do? How would I react? And if people go, I don't know, but I'm just going to follow this character and see where it goes. I mean, how connected did you feel to the main character too? I've forgotten her name, actually.
Her name's Stacey.
Stacey.
So,
I know Asta is the daughter. Asta but Stacey, how connected did you feel to Stacey?
While I was writing it, I put myself in her position, and you know, I really, even though science underpins the work, it's not really a work of science fiction. It's more a work of psychological, you know, psychological tension. It's more about the psychological and emotional space, and there's a lot of empathy in there. And for me, when I was writing it, I put myself into her position, and I drew on that emotional connection with the baby from my own experience to some extent. And so, you know, I empathized with her. I felt the pain that she was feeling. I went through labor with her, so much so that I actually physically had symptoms and had to have a hot water bottle on my stomach while I was writing the birth scenes.
Wow. So you really got into character. You really slipped into her. She almost possessed you in a way, took you over.
She did, really, yeah. I wrote it in a very kind of tight, the first draft in a very tight time frame. So, you know, I sat there every day for 4 months and just basically pushed it out, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like a labor in itself of just kind of being fully focused on this work and just kind of writing it with that intensity. And I felt like I wanted it to have that intensity. So it was like a kind of a surge, or a kind of an emotional raw out of it, that rawness.
Well, it certainly comes across in the book. What sort of reaction have you got from people?
Some people really, really love it, and people who I've spoken to have read it in a very short time frame, so in a couple of days. I mean, when you write a book and you think, oh, I've done so much work, and someone says to you, I read it in one sitting.
Did you do it justice? I want you to read it slower.
It's a bit like making a really nice cake, and, you know, everyone demolishes it in about 5 minutes.
I know.
yeah, some people have reacted like that. There are a few people that have not liked the narrator because she is quite intense,
Mm,
and you know, there's a couple of people who have not liked. So a couple of reviews have not really
mm,
engaged with her, and I think you really, that's because you really need to be in a space where you can identify with that connection with something.
yeah.
I think, I'm not
Mm,
sure. You know,
mm.
everybody's different. Everybody has their own tastes in literature. Not
Has
everybody's going to like the thing.
What about guys? Have you had men actually read it?
You've read it, Josh.
I'm sort of a guy. But have you had feedback from men?
I've had a couple of really nice reviews
Mm.
from men. Axel Dadswell, who you might know,
Yep, yep.
he reviews on his blog called Larval Forms, and he did a great review of it.
Oh, okay. Yep, yep,
Um,
yep, yep. 'Cause I
yeah,
was going to say it's very much you have to be into that mother mindset, because that's the whole point of this story is the mum Stacey protecting her daughter, no matter how unusual that daughter is. It's that the intensity of that bond that overpowers everything. And I think,
mm.
do men understand that, or do fathers understand it, or is that something that only a mother can really understand? I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at here. What are your thoughts?
Um, I've had some. I've had a number of men who've said nice things to me about the book. I've done interviews with a couple of um,
Mm,
male readers, and yeah, I don't think that makes a big difference to that. I think, you know, we all have connections with our children like that. I don't think, I mean, motherhood is different because you are physically kind of entwined with the child in a unique way. And I guess I try to depict that in some ways. Perhaps, you know, a man by reading this story might learn some things about that connection, that physical
mm.
bond. Um, but I don't think it excludes a male reader at all.
Speaking of connections, there's a, a beautiful connection you've got between Stacey and Asta and the environment, and especially when they move down to Locational. And the way you describe just the scenery, just the setting, even I felt I could actually reach out and touch it. Where did that connection come from?
The place where they moved to in Australind is close to where I grew up as a child.
Mm,
And so I felt a real kind of closeness to that environment. It's set in Australind, around the end of the Leschenault estuary, and they live on Cathedral Avenue in my imagination, in a place that doesn't exist. I
yeah.
created their own.
Mm,
Um, but I went there and I observed and I took notes and I did a lot of work with that landscape description. Um, I'm not a terribly excellent poet, but I did write a lot of
I am sure
poetry.
you're absolutely wonderful. I think you've even won awards, I think, for poetry, haven't you, young lady?
Um, I I don't consider myself a poet. I consider myself a prose writer. So,
Mm,
but I did use a lot of poetry in the writing of this, and I spent time in that environment writing um, on paper with a pen poetry. And then I
wow.
took that poetry back to my desk and I looked at the poetry and I used that poetry to draw out that description of place. And so I used some of the metaphors and things from the poems that I'd written in the descriptions of place. And then I screwed the poem up and chucked it in the bin, and I kept the nice little bit of prose that was produced.
Did you really
Not
actually
really.
throw it? Wow. Because, I mean, now that you've described it that way, I can actually sense that. I can go, the only way you could actually really capture it is to actually sit in that environment and then write it and then go back. Because the way you've explained it, and yeah, you could smell it. It's almost three-dimensional the way you've done it. And I think people who know the area personally will go, wow, Donna's nailed that. She's really encapsulated that area. And the fact that you kept like names like Australind and things like that in there, was that a conscious choice to keep real locational names in there? Because a lot of people just
Absolutely.
make places up.
They do make places up. I didn't want to do that. I felt like, you know, people are not frightened to set their novel in New York City. And writers over in the eastern states set their stories in Melbourne without being afraid to name it. So I don't see why we can't do that as well. And I wanted to kind of celebrate the landscape where we live, because there's not a lot of work that's written in the south, that's set in the southwest of WA, especially that really kind of engages with place in a way depth. So I felt, because I live here, that it was important to kind of create a literature of place, I guess, that says something about here.
I agree. I mean, I love seeing our locations where we live in a book, and I think, wow, it sort of not legitimizes where we live, but you go, wow, it's almost a little bit famous, because, you know, I mean, you had Holden Shepherd talk about Geraldton in his book, then you got Monique Mulligan, her book's coming out in a couple of weeks, and hers is set down in Bridgetown. And so you got all these locations that we know that you're familiar with. And it's sort of, I don't know, just a bit of pride, I guess, in just seeing those names up there in books. It's great recognition.
I went to chat to a group of ladies who were in a book club that had read my book, and they were in Bunbury, and they were talking about how they loved that landscape and they could almost walk around it, and they were really excited when they read it, that they could imagine and visualize that whole space, you know, and all of the different bird life and features and things.
So that's what you could do as a side project. You could have paid walking tours of the scenery and fauna. $10 a shot, go in a group, and then Donna, you can walk people through the wetlands and all that sort of stuff. Great idea. You can put the website at the back of the book. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So what was it like taking the book from the short story into a full-length novel? What was that process like?
For me to do that, it was like freedom, because I have written over the last few years quite a lot of short stories, and to be able to indulge in a story that was able to kind of spread its wings and sprawl out across the page like Fauna, like a novel does, instead of a short story, which is a very kind of tight form where you don't waste anything. It's all very kind of economical. I guess Fauna is also quite economical in the prose, and it doesn't sort of waste any time getting into the action, and it doesn't have a lot of kind of extraneous description in it. So I guess some of those short story skills are embedded in Fauna, but to have the freedom to expand the story like that was really quite a joy. And I really loved finding out all of the details to fill in the information. So I did a lot of research beforehand.
I can imagine you would have been a heap of research too, because some people would be reading it going, "Oh, that's not right. I don't do the research on that one." You know what people are like; they would bloody pick anything out. So obviously the research. What was the most interesting thing you found from doing the research about Neanderthals?
That they were a lot more sophisticated than what we have given them credit for historically. And over the last 10 years, because of microbiology and the advances in that kind of technology and being able to look back, we don't just use carbon dating anymore, which is what I learned at school for how you date a fossil, but they use all kinds of microbiology to date a fossil. And they find out lots of information about them through the microbiome that's left on the fossils. So I think that the most evocative thing for me was that they used the teeth of Neanderthal people to find out what their diet was like, to find out what medicines they used. They could look at a person's lifespan through their dental records by using the microbiome. And I used all of that information in writing the work. So I looked at the development of the teeth in a Neanderthal child, right from birth, right through to adulthood. And I used the dental information to guide the growth of Asta. So as she grew up, went through her different stages of development, I used the dental information that I had. And I had the teeth even drawn out on a piece of paper with what went where, you know, they lost, what grew at what time, and what markers were in place for that. So which ones came in at weaning, what meant that going through puberty, that kind of stuff. And all of that information to guide her development. So I just love that stuff.
Wow. I hate
Just so
research. I find it
fascinating.
boring as all hell's teeth. But
Well,
obviously you do, and obviously you have to do it in regards to your story there. Did you know where it was going to go? Had you already thought about, okay, here's the short story, and it ended at a certain point in the book. Then you go, where is it going to go after this? Had you had an idea where it was going to go, or did you just start writing and just see where it went?
the short story was just, and you can easily find it online. It's called The Exhibit. It's on the Westerly website.
Mm-hmm.
It's just scenes of inside the ultrasound room. So it's scenes inside a clinic where they're doing the scans. And so it just goes from a kind of early stage of a pregnancy towards where it's about to happen. She's about to give birth. So it compacts it into these little scenes. And it's only about 3,000 words, so it's very short.
Mm.
But so to develop it into a novel, I knew that I would have to go back before that and then go considerably after that and fill in all the gaps in between those scenes. And so I guess in some ways it formed something of a structure for the first part of the novel. But I really didn't. I had this idea that I wanted to break the novel into parts. So the first part is called In Utero, which is during the pregnancy. And after the birth, it's called postpartum. So from the birth right through to when Asta reaches puberty, which is the end of the novel. So that's the kind of structure I had in mind. I had a kind of a glimpse of what the end might look like and where the end point would be. So when I started writing it, I had a framework and I worked to that framework.
Okay.
The first section is kind of divided into weeks and the second section is divided into years.
Right. Okay. That's speeding up of time. So, but you had I like that. You had a rough framework which you followed, because I know some people just sit down and write and just got no idea where the thing ends up going. So it's just different ways of people writing. So is that the way you normally write? Because I know that you wrote The Albanian back in 2007, which won the Tag Hungerford Award. Did you write that in the same way? Did you know where you were going with that novel?
Yeah, I did. I had a structure for that one too. So I had a framework for it, and I worked to sections and followed a kind of the structure that I had. I did try and write a novel freeform, where you start at the beginning and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's in my bottom drawer.
How long's it been in the bottom drawer for?
I play with it occasionally. I take it out for a bit of a joyride and then I put it back in the bottom drawer. Will
it ever see the light of day?
Maybe one day.
So I was going to ask you, I'll get to that in a minute. How has COVID-19 and this crazy year, I mean, whoever has released a book in 2020 has just gone through therapy sessions, just going, why can't it be normal? I've got my baby out there and it's just everything. How has it been for you launching Fauna in this chaos time?
We had actually a physical launch here at ECU on campus.
That was
in the middle of March.
Almost a week before lockdowns, wasn't it?
It was about a week before lockdown. And I was very fortunate. I was really pleased that was actually able to happen, even though about half of the people who were going to come cancelled because they thought they were all going to get sick by coming to my book launch, which is fair enough. But it was nice to have one sort of a proper launch. I had been booked at a number of writers' festivals, but some of them cancelled, and the ones who weren't cancelled reduced their program right down just to have an online one. So I haven't done any festivals at all, which is really disappointing because I think there's a lot to talk about with this book.
I think there is. There's so many discussion points, and that's part of the joy of being an author. Is when you do release a book, you go on the book tour, and you said you go on the festivals, and that's sort of half legitimizes the whole thing. But when you are not able to, or it's got to be online, it leaves you a little bit deflated, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does a bit.
I know that because I had my kids' book come out in
Mm.
April, and that was just a disaster. but eventually it's going quite well at the moment. But how is obviously you've had to relook at how you market and how you promote it. What have you done to change from the traditional model of doing the festivals and stuff? Have you changed a different way of getting the book out there and getting you out there?
I guess what I've done over the last few months is to get a few more pieces out and to like pieces of writing out there into the world to try and help with that kind of profile and keeping my profile in the, you know, with more current stuff coming out. So I have a story in this, which is called New Australian Fiction 2020.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So I've
well
got a
done.
short story in here called The Fingerprint, and this is published from Kill Your Darlings over in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a story about another genetic experiment. It's an art experiment where there's a biological art project that gets done onto a woman's body. So it's quite confronting. It's been described by a reviewer as sorry, I've gone blank.
That's right. But obviously it's a challenging read for some people.
Yeah, I think so.
Story. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So I've also had a story in Westerly recently, the most recent edition of the Westerly magazine that comes out of UWA. And I've written a piece for a journal called Science Right Now, which was a really interesting piece about writing using scientific premise as the basis and trying to find the fictional voice while not keeping that science voice in there. So that was really interesting to kind of write about from fiction perspective.
How have you gone? Because I know you're not huge on social media, like you're not too excited about it. How have you gone with having to build this author profile? But it sounds like you're actually building it by putting in the hard yards and actually writing, as opposed to someone like myself who spends more time on Facebook taking selfies and things like that. You know, how have you found trying to do the social media author platform stuff?
Well, you know, I just have gone with what's around me and tried to keep it normal and unpretentious, because I just wanted to keep it real. And so, you know, I know that you can enhance yourself and make yourself look like all kinds of manga figures and all sorts of things, but no, I just don't get into that stuff because I'm not a teenager. And so, you know, I've just sort of gone with whatever's around me. So if there's a picture of my chooks, or there's a picture going for a walk in the bush, or, you know, those kinds of ordinary everyday things interspersed amongst the book related content. So, you know,
it's trying to find that balance. How have you found trying to find that balance though? Are you very self-conscious, or are you here's my chooks, put it up on Facebook on your author page, and you're comfortable with that? Or do you go, I've put up 3 chooks so far this week, I need to put up a book review? Do you stress about things like that?
No, I don't stress about things like that.
Okay. That is good.
I try not to do too much of it because I think that, you know, I don't want to saturate people with my life, you know, so I just kind of try and keep it relevant, especially on my Facebook author page. I just try and keep it relevant to writing. Whereas, you know, on Instagram, I put a few pictures of, I had a hyacinth bulb in a jar, and I watched its progress over its weeks, and it's just blossomed this weekend. So I did that. I watched the progress of that. And I guess that's, as far as that does connect to my writing, because in my work, there's a lot of stuff that is connected to my observations of the natural environment.
Yeah. Okay. How do you find the time to actually write? Because you basically run the arts and humanities faculty at ECU in the Southwest campus in Bunbury there, and you've got a family. Where do you find the time to write, to actually sit down?
I try and reserve one day a week to work on my writing. So even when I'm working full time, I try and keep one day of the week sacred to write and use that time to produce bits and pieces or to work towards something,
Okay.
whether that's a bit of research or whatever it is. And then when it's not the semester time, I can indulge in a bit more of that. I've been really lucky to have. I've been really lucky to have a couple of wonderful writing retreats over at Varuna in the Blue Mountains.
Is
And
that how
I've
you
got
say
another.
it, Varuna? I've always
Mm,
seen it written, and I've got, how do I say it? You know, what do I don't want to embarrass myself going Varuna or Varuna. So it's, how do you say it again?
Varuna.
Varuna. It looks like a lovely place. I've seen a lot of authors post that they've had a retreat there or something like that or whatever, and it looks amazing. So is it as amazing as what people say it is?
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful.
Mm.
And just really peaceful, and being able to disconnect from your life and go over the other side of the country and write intensively is just a
So
wonderful
you're not
experience.
like all the other people, like some other people that go, okay, I've got a grant, I've got a whole bunch of money, I can go stay at this writer's retreat, and as soon as they sit down, writer's block. Or they spend the entire week just walking around going, I wish I'll get like there, I can't do it. But not for you?
I think I walk around all the time wanting to write, but unable to because of my other commitments. And so as soon as someone says you've got time to write, it's just like the cork comes out and the genie's out of the bottle, and off we go.
Wow.
So some of it, I don't know where it comes from. It's sort of churning away in the subconscious. And then if you put me in front of a notebook with a pen or in front of a computer, it'll seems to just come out.
Wow. So many people are quite envious about that. And I think that's a great, it's not even a skill or what I don't even know what you would
It's
call
a
it.
gift.
It's a
I
gift.
know it's a gift. But I think,
But you
those
followed
people,
through. That's the other thing. You followed through. It's
yeah,
it's not like you get half started and give up and walk away. You've actually got that. You want to see whatever that story is, see come to fruition.
yeah. I think I don't have very much time to write either.
Mm.
So, that time when the genie goes out of the bottle is pretty precious, and I try and make the most of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, what project are you working on now?
I'm just starting some research for another novel, and hopefully I get some time to work on it soon. I've I've just started reading around it and making a plan and a synopsis and that kind of stuff, and have a kind of vision of it. So it's going to have the same sort of setting as Fauna.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be set in that landscape again, because I feel like to tell in that landscape. And it's also going to be set in the future.
Oh, okay. 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 Now, at what point do you pitch the idea to your agent? Do you have it written first and then pitch it, or do you go, "Here's an idea formulating"? What do you do?
I think I'll write the whole thing and I'll tell her that she knows I'm working on something and has
Oh,
a
okay.
kind of, she has an idea already. I did
Okay,
sort
good.
of tell her about it. So,
Yeah, and see if she likes it, and then you get a publishing deal and make another $1 million,
yeah,
or make $1 million, or make several millions of dollars. Well, we can only hope, can't we, Donna?
we can hope.
And enter it in all the awards and competitions and all that sort of stuff.
Well, fingers crossed,
Mm-hmm. Now, what is the most important thing in life to remember or to focus on?
Finding in whatever you're doing, I think, is one of the most important things. I teach up here at uni, and I try and find joy in doing that. On the weekend, I was busy pulling out weeds, trying to find some joy in that. Writing is a great thing to be doing. We're very fortunate to be in that position, to be writers in Australia. I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and I love it. So
I like that. Find joy in what you're doing. Donna Mazza, thank you very much. If people want to connect with you, where do they go?
on Instagram or Facebook, Donna Mazza author or Donna Mazza writer. one for one and one for the other. So
And have
you can find me.
You've got a website, haven't you?
I don't have a website, no.
After all I've been telling everybody about how to build your author platform, the main key thing is having a website. But but you're with Alan and Unwin, so people can just Google Donna Mazza Fauna to find a copy of the book, or go to your local bookshop.
Yep. It's also available through Booktopia online.
Okay.
Yep, you can get it through them too.
Okay, beautiful. Otherwise, you can connect through Facebook, Instagram. I'll put the little links up down here, and I'll put the Alan and Unwin page as well. So, Donna Mazza, thank you very much. I think people are going to enjoy reading Fauna when they grab a copy, and good luck for whatever you're working on now.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Hi, thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Got any questions, whether you want to say whether you liked it, you didn't like the interview, and like my hair's too grey or something like that, post a comment below. I won't get upset, okay? Now, gratuitous plug here. If you want to grab my books, Been You Is Enough, Okay to Feel the Way You Do, or Magnificent Mistakes, or all three, just go to my website at joshlangley.com.au, because it's about trying to change the world one book at a time, helping one kid just to feel good about who they are and feel good in their own skin. If we can just help one child, then they may help another child, then another one, then another one, and then that's how we slowly change the world. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next episode.